This is the Brave New Coin Crypto Conversation, hosted by Andy Pickering.
Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. I'm your host and welcome to the Crypto Conversation, a Brave New Coin podcast where we talk to the people building the future in the Bitcoin, blockchain and cryptocurrency space. Let's do it. My guest today is Rines. Rich is an initial contributor to Core Dao, working on all sorts of things, scaling Bitcoin, opening up Bitcoin DeFi, a whole lot of other stuff. We'll learn about this today, but welcome to the show, Rich.
Thanks so much for having me, Andy. Really excited to chat today.
I'm excited to chat as well. Let's do what we do at the beginning of the show, Rich. It would be cool if you could please introduce yourself. I'd love to hear some of your personal and professional backstory, what you've been doing in the lead up to getting involved as an initial contributor to Core Dao.
For sure. Happy to take you back through memory lane. So I got involved with crypto back in 2013, right as I was graduating college, fell down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. By the 2017 cycle, I really kind of understood this is what I wanted to spend, the rest of my career on. Found my way to Coinbase for 3.5 years, led all money movements engineering. That was a ton of fun, met a lot of amazing people, got to move $1 trillion+. It's kind of one of those experiences that was really, eye-opening, and I really, really enjoyed it. The company went from, a few hundred people to a few thousand people, and I'm a 0 to 1 person. So my other professional experience is building startups or founding startups. And when, the kind of pieces of core all came together, another 0 to 1, that was really appealing, especially as, kind of the original thesis or ethos of core is being kind of reactionary to what's happened in crypto over the last, let's call it like 5 to 7 years, where at least at that time, no one was out there trying to scale Bitcoin. There was so many interesting kind of things happening in the Ethereum community, but Bitcoin was kind of uninteresting for a while. And as someone who, was a closet BTC maxi for a long time, I, jumped at the chance. Now we're about 65 people from all around the globe. And it's been a pretty crazy ride thus far, but we're, 1% of the way through the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. The journey is just beginning. Give us a little bit of a sense then as to when the core project began to start to come together, because, and you can expand on that context, Richard, because it is interesting in the way that, you kind of explained it briefly then, and that, exactly right. For a long time, Bitcoin was really just seen as, digital money, digital gold, perhaps a store of value, good at doing that, but perhaps, lagging behind all the other exploding chains and ecosystems. But Bitcoin is now catching up. And of course, Core is part of that journey. We're at the beginning. So just I guess explain a little bit more of the beginning origin story, if you like, of Core.
Yeah, so what do you think about the origin of Core, again, is kind of reactionary to the 2017 cycle. And if we go back to the 2017 cycle, that was really the first breakout of Ethereum, all the tokens built on top of it, the ICO wave. Like there had been a bunch of stuff that got built prior to that, but that's really the Ethereum breakout cycle. Obviously, it's had DeFi summer and things after, but that's where kind of a lot of that started. And with that kind of brought out this other wave, which was a lot of these token projects that were much more insiders versus outsiders. And what I mean by that is at launch, they were predominantly owned by venture capitalists and that sort of thing. And they really weren't very decentralized for the most part. And for the early folks, part of Core, it was, hey, if we go back to the original ethos of, Bitcoin or even Ethereum, there was this real focus on decentralization and making that paramount. Like the one thing that you can't, trade off, you can't really trade off any of the blockchain trilemma, but what people had consistently started to trade off was the idea of decentralization in favor of performance primarily. And with that, it was like, hey, if you go back to first principles and you're designing a new blockchain system, what would you do? Well, you'd want it to be rooted in Bitcoin or a very strongly decentralized chain, because that is, again, this really core principle of any decentralized system. And that was kind of the key insight, if you will. And then from there was this deeper piece, which, well, Bitcoin's the most decentralized. It's this perfect digital gold, this really hard monetary asset that is likely the hardest money we'll ever see. And with that, it was, all right, well, let's find a way to incorporate Bitcoin directly into the consensus mechanism, because we want to ultimately scale Bitcoin and get Bitcoin into the hands of everyone around the world, which is, impossible to do on Bitcoin-L1. And then that morphed into, okay, well, the Bitcoin base layer, isn't super scalable. We're not going to do like a Bitcoin Cash thing. So what we should probably do is look at maybe some of the better parts of the Ethereum ecosystem as well. And that's where the kind of original tagline of Core came from, which was Bitcoin and Ethereum had a baby. Because the genesis was really kind of a Bitcoin maxi and a Core max and a Ethereum maxi who really couldn't see each other's sides. But then after a series of like logical debates and reasoning said, hey, there's actually great pieces on both sides. So let's slam them all together. And how that played out is kind of the decentralization and security of Bitcoin on one side, and then the scalability, composability, et cetera, of the EVM on the other. And that was really that genesis piece of kind of these two things working together in kind of a 1 + 1 = 3 type scenario. And that was really like the V1 of Core was, all right, let's put these two things together. And that's where Satoshi Plus consensus also originated. And Satoshi Plus consensus is what Core still operates on today. Originally, it had two parts. It had delegated proof of stake on one side, and on the other side, it had delegated proof of work. And that delegated proof of work comes directly from Bitcoin through this relayed block concept that I'm happy to dive into if we want to go into that later. But the idea is it's kind of a different way to do merge mining, a more efficient economic way to do merge mining. And then since, as of earlier this year, a third prong actually got added, which is non-custodial Bitcoin staking. And through all these different components, Core helped create this idea of Bitcoin alignment. And Bitcoin alignment is, again, trying to scale Bitcoin, not just by getting more Bitcoin onto L2s or sidechains like Core, but also to help give back to Bitcoin economically, which means additional block rewards for Bitcoin miners and now Bitcoin stakers. Because at the end of the day, not only does Core need to remain secure and decentralized, but its feeder system, in this case, Bitcoin, also needs to remain secure and decentralized. And these additional rewards directly go into supporting that. Because if Bitcoin itself winds up, having issues, whether with its own security or anything else, it'll probably black hole all of crypto. So it's really important to have these systems be symbiotic versus parasitic with one another. And that was really the origin story. So it started in 2018, went to mainnet in early 2023. Yeah, I guess that was before Bitcoin was cool again, but it's nice to see lots of folks out there trying to scale Bitcoin now.
Yes, indeed. And look, that's a great summary of the origin story. You've kind of just skipped ahead through my notes, answering my questions before I could even get to them. Yeah, so I guess we've covered most of, the kind of, without getting too technical, the Satoshi Plus consensus mechanism. And yeah, I love the idea of, you guys were kind of building and getting this all in place, mainnet launch before, as you said, Bitcoin became cool again. Maybe just dig into that. Love to kind of understand how you think about the current state of Bitcoin and how that, I guess, build out of the various different layer 2 solutions and, Bitcoin DeFi. There's Rines, there's ordinals, there's just a whole lot of stuff happening that, as you said, is starting to make Bitcoin cool again. Maybe just dig into that and love to understand what you think is happening. What are the pathways forward and how Core is part of that.
So back in so if we go back to kind of where we were in around Core's launch in like 2023. There wasn't a lot of folks that were building on Bitcoin or trying to build, Bitcoin-aligned scaling solutions. Then ordinals happened, and ordinals, I think, was really kind of a shifting over the Overton window for Bitcoin, where it became okay to use your Bitcoin on chain for more than just store of value. And that ignited, kind of this latent Bitcoin community that wanted to do more. It was really hard at that time to determine how big of a community that was, but the demand was out there. Then throughout 2023, we saw BRC20s, we saw a variety of other kind of standards on top of Bitcoin get built out. And you started to see more and more people get interested in Bitcoin again. Like, and how I describe it is we had this really tough time in the Bitcoin developer ecosystem after the block size wars, right? That was a very divisive time in Bitcoin's history. And a lot of folks took a very, quite a while to actually recover from that. But ordinals was one of these new things that the Bitcoin community writ large could latch onto. And again, it became okay to do more with your Bitcoin. And I think that inspired a lot of teams out there that have been excited about Bitcoin for a long time, but we're limited to WBTC or something else to say, maybe it is time to go scale Bitcoin. Let's throw our hat in the ring. And starting about mid last year, I think is when you started to see, the idea of Bitcoin L2s, like Stacks changed their narrative from a 1.5 to an L2. And then you started to see more and more of these groups that were less trying to mimic side chains and more trying to mimic what we've seen in the Ethereum ecosystem come online. And then many of those have launched early this year or will launch throughout, 2024. Overall, I think it's very healthy to see more and more folks trying to build on Bitcoin, trying to get more Bitcoin into more productive use cases. It's totally fine to leave Bitcoin as just digital gold, don't get me wrong. But I think it's amazing that Bitcoin holders now have more options. This is where Core's non-custodial proof of stake was the first product to market to do true Bitcoin staking. And the idea there was for many of these Bitcoin holders, they never want to bridge, right? So many of their friends, family, et cetera, have lost money in BlockFi or Celsius or Genesis, like one of these centralized institutions. The last thing they want to do is put their Bitcoin into a multi-sig. So Core's non-custodial Bitcoin staking was designed in a way that you actually never give up custody. You just do a time lock on Bitcoin L1 and now earn passive yield. Core has a 81-year emission curve, again, designed to be this exogenous block reward for Bitcoin. So it's very sustainable passive yield. And that's this new primitive that many folks are building on top of, right? Because now Bitcoin's a yield producing asset, productive asset for the first time. And if we look at the parallel to Ethereum, right, like that opened up so many new use cases and really helped propel kind of the second wave of, Ethereum DeFi with these new primitives. And that was just one side of it. I think where many of these other folks are competing is more on the like the Bitcoin DeFi side or BTC fi, trying to build their own ecosystem on top of it. And I think we're seeing some innovation there, which is great. I think more and more teams building on Bitcoin, the better for Bitcoin. My personal belief is that I think Bitcoin will become the dominant asset by TVL in the next 3 to 5 years. It's $1.5 trillion today. If 10% of that to 30% of it, which is the Ethereum analogy, comes into DeFi, that's bigger than Ethereum itself. So I think we're going to see a big change where Ethereum showed what the potential could be, and then when you put in this harder money, this better collateral, the potential is potentially unlimited. When it comes to these some of these other scaling solutions, and Core has a lot of interesting partnerships with these folks. I think the whole group right now is focused on growing the pie because there really is a lot more opportunity to partner together and to build this ecosystem together than to compete at the moment. I think what's important, and I say this about Core, I say this about every scaling solution, whether it's a side chain or an L2, is to understand the trust assumptions that go into the bridge that you're using. And again, with Core, you're not doing Bitcoin staking. There is no bridging. Like, just do it all on Bitcoin L1. But if you want to get involved in BTC fi, you can use a couple different mechanisms, whether it's our HTLC atomic swap protocol, which is trustless, or our trust minimized bridge, both of which give you nice properties alongside of it. With some of these other systems, some of those trust assumptions have a little bit of a ways to go in terms of making sure that it's something that you're comfortable with, but many folks are. And it's important just to understand whether you get involved in Core or some other ecosystem, what the underlying mechanics are, how you can get back your funds, all those sorts of things, because we have to be careful. We don't want to go from 0 to 100 maybe, right? Like, if we want to put our toes in the pool slowly and then kind of go from there, because I think a lot of Bitcoiners did miss Ethereum DeFi and maybe aren't as familiar with a lot of the struggles that happened there over the last 5+ years. Ethereum's figured out a lot of that. It's not perfect. The EVM has flaws. I think everyone would agree with that. but it's still, the best thing that we have today, not only from like a developer onboarding, tooling, et cetera, perspective, but it's fantastic to watch all of these teams launch. And I think it's net really accretive for Bitcoin to open up these new use cases and to get more Bitcoin into the hands of people around the world that need faster, cheaper solutions while leaving Bitcoin as this, perfect settlement layer.
Yeah, very, very well said, Rich. Just maybe just dig in quickly, just to, I guess what the kind of yields are available for people that are wishing to, look at staking or essentially locking up their Bitcoin, and that's quite ambitious targets that you're talking about. Do you think that because if Bitcoin just does continue to, I suppose, do what it has done, which is offer reasonably strong returns by any measure, as long as you look at it over, at least a 4-year time frame or longer. Do you really think that maybe more passive investors or kind of mainstream people or ETF investors, those kind of people, would be wanting to get more involved with, chasing that yield in addition to, whatever appreciation Bitcoin has over the long term as well?
So I think the answer is undoubtedly yes. There's already 200 million plus that's staked on Core today, or on Bitcoin via Core's Bitcoin staking. There's also Core's launched a few ETPs with Valor throughout now Germany and some of the Nordic regions, going global later this year, as well as maybe some ETFs afterwards. And the idea is you don't necessarily need to pick between using a traditional financial product to earn Bitcoin yield. You will be able to do it on your own, non-custodially, or through one of these, new products. So I think there is opportunity on both sides. Core's philosophy is to try to open this up to everyone that's a Bitcoin holder, whether or not, they have their own keys or not. I do always believe that if you are capable of self-custody and that sort of thing, of course, I recommend that. But I do know for, funds, many institutions, various people around the world, like an ETF, is the next best thing. But we're trying to bring that, really to the forefront throughout the rest of this year, because we do think we should have democratized access to Bitcoin yield, no matter where your Bitcoin is ultimately stored. In terms of the returns, it's hard because it fluctuates. I think right now, as of the data reporting, it's somewhere around 8%. But again, that could go up, that could go down. It is based on Core rewards. Eventually, we'll probably do Bitcoin rewards, but we wanted to do it totally trustlessly because that's a key piece of the overall product design here. And we didn't want to violate, that underlying philosophy. For your, kind of original question, which was, hey, do we think we'll see people chasing Bitcoin yield, like further and further? Well, I think what's fascinating about Bitcoin is people have been super excited to hold Bitcoin just for upside exposure for the last 15 years. Now, if you're even earning so low rate of return, again, Core is about 8%, but let's say, some of these other systems might be 1% or 0.5%. At scale, that could still be very interesting, right? Because it's better than zero today. And especially if you're not taking on risk to go do that, I think that's, a no-brainer personally, but that's, up to everyone themselves.
Makes sense. Very well said. On the Core website, there's kind of I guess it's like a mini dashboard, but it just it shows, I suppose, the usage and the community size. If you like, just 250 million plus transactions on chain, over 2 million Twitter followers on the Core X account, 5 million active wallets. So just put that into context. Just there's some good usage happening.
So we love the Cortoshi community. I would put the Cortoshi community up pound for pound relative to any community in all of crypto. They've been our most loyal fans since the very beginning, and I think there's a number of reasons why. I think again people have longed for Bitcoin scaling solutions for for quite a while now. But I think on top of it, it's important to talk about how Core initially came to market. And I talked about this a little bit earlier, but to kind of do the next level double click, Core was a fair launch project. And what I mean by that is there was no outside investors. It was really a community-owned project. And the community was the early holders of the network. There was this real sense of community ownership. And I think that's one of the reasons that you've seen such a strong community and such growth on that side. is because the core network really is meant to be for everyone around the world. It's not meant to be too specific or exclusionary. And Core, again, wanted to onboard as many people as possible because, with my personal belief and then a lot of the early folks at Core is that everyone should have a chance to trade Bitcoin or to own Bitcoin or to stake Bitcoin, you name it, but to have some interaction with Bitcoin, the asset. And we know that on Bitcoin-L1, that's impossible. And in order to do that, we can't just go after the 100 to 300 million, depending on the numbers you want to look at, Web3 users. We actually have to go onboard these 6 billion Web2 users out there. In order to do that, they need to have easy onboarding mechanics to be able to get into these new systems. And Core, welcomes all these different users, and it has reflected pretty well in terms of some of the usage numbers of Core. If you stack up Core relative to any other Bitcoin scaling solution out there, the numbers really do speak for themselves. I think as of the date of this recording, it's like 90,000 weekly active users on DApp Radar or something of that number. So not the tip of the tip, but for Bitcoin scaling solution, it really stands on its own.
Makes sense. Very well said again, Rich. What else should we cover just as we start to finish off this part of the podcast? I can see, there's an incentive program, there's an airdrop, there's a lot going on just on the website, which of course, listeners, is coredao.org, but there'll be a link in the show notes. But just talk through, any other parts of the ecosystem and the various products, services, opportunities, incentives that are available to people. Rich.
So the Core Ignition program is in its first season, as you were mentioning, Andy. So you can check out ignition.coredao.org. It is geo-restricted, so some folks aren't able to actually partake, unfortunately. But if you are in a region where you can partake, it's an interesting program to be a part of, and you get rewards for taking part in various apps in the Core ecosystem. So definitely worth checking out. There'll be multiple seasons of Core Ignition as well. It's a way to give back to users and give back to builders. Core has a builders first mentality as well, not just users first. What we mean by that is we want Core to be a place where people can launch and build businesses that have staying power, that are multi-cycle businesses, aren't just, hey, you launch one day, collect a grant and leave. We've seen way too much of that in Web3, but it's not just to even just kind of be on the negativity towards the builder side there. It's actually mostly negativity towards the chain side. Throughout many of these cycles, it's like you kind of just pay your way into people building on top of your chain. And then the builders actually feel abandoned because they need your dev rel, they need your support, they need your help for marketing or whatever. A lot of these projects just aren't there. And that's a really terrible deal. So we've taken a very different approach, which is super hands-on, trying to work with amazing teams that want to invest in Core and to want to build real businesses on Core. And Ignition is just one of the ways that that's been manifested into reality. The Core ecosystem has hundreds of projects that have launched. There's so many interesting ones that are launching on a daily or weekly basis. Definitely encourage you to check out the Core Twitter and just kind of follow a bunch of the different things that are launching. There's pretty much something for everyone at this point, whether it's kind of your traditional DeFi applications or even a bunch of games that have launched on Core. So there really is so many different ways to get involved in the ecosystem. And depending on some of those activities, there might be rewards as well. Oh, sorry, I left out one other piece. Stake. Definitely get involved with Core's Bitcoin staking as well as just staking Core on the network itself. We do think it creates this nice incentive alignment where you're receiving rewards for helping to secure the chain, whether or not you're on Bitcoin or on Core.
Yes, thank you, Rich. And just for people that are looking to do that, just walk them through the process, Rich. I'm sure it's easy to do. What should they do? Where do they go? What do they need to do?
Yeah, so if they want to stake, they go to stake.coredao.org. Really handy flow. The easiest flow, I think, is with Element Wallet, which is the native wallet of the Core ecosystem. They've got like a one-click, pretty slick flow for both Bitcoin and Core. You can use MetaMask or Rabby or your other kind of preferred wallet as well, particularly if you're on desktop. It's super easy to go stake your Core or your Bitcoin. If you're using Bitcoin, I think Unisat and Xverse also work. In terms of Ignition, ignition.coredao.org is a whole kind of sign-up flow. If you make it through the sign-up flow, because there is a bunch of qualification pieces, but once you go through that flow, It's pretty hands-on. It brings you through like the bridge. It talks about different applications that you can use on Core, but it's really kind of a step-by-step program to maximize your points for the season.
Got it. All right. Well, as we start to finish off the podcast, then, Rich, the way we do that is by running you through the very famous crypto conversation hot take round. Are you up for it?
Always. I'll have to be measured here. I've got too many spicy takes. So.
The spicier, the better. I think I know what you'll say to question one, but look, interested for you to flesh it out. Question one for you, Rich, is where would you say that you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-chain opportunist spectrum?
That's tricky. So I think deep down, I believe that Bitcoin is this beautiful digital gold, and like I'll always have a very special place for Bitcoin in my heart. But I think Bitcoin deserves to be multi-chain. It should have more utility brought to it. We just shouldn't do it on Bitcoin-L1 because it's not meant for that. So I think in terms of like the maxi, do you really, really highly value Bitcoin? I'm very far aligned with it. But then on the multi-chain side, I'm also fairly aligned because, you know, what I do on a day-to-day basis is find ways to help give more utility to Bitcoin in other ecosystems, primarily Core.
Yeah, a very nuanced and pragmatic take, probably the correct one, to be fair. All right, well, moving on, Rich, what would you say is your firmest conviction crypto opinion?
Firmest conviction is giving me that Bitcoin will be the dominant asset by TVL. I would say 5 years, I think, is safe. I think 3 years a little more aggressive, but I think the most aggressive would be by the end of this cycle. Like I think there's so much Bitcoin on the sidelines that is actually looking for utility. Like I tell people all the time, there's this like sliding scale, and it's really hard to tell if you look at the totality of Bitcoin, how much of it wants to get involved in DeFi or not. But I think every day it's sliding more and more to the right where that window is continuing to shift. And some use case, whether it's Bitcoin MakerDAO or something similar that gives upside exposure while allowing you to hold your Bitcoin and get additional leverage, could be the first DeFi protocol that brings in 100, 200 billion, like some sort of crazy number. So that's probably the one I'm most convicted about.
Very nice. Coinbase, love to get your kind of view on Coinbase. You spent some time at Coinbase. For a long time, there was this narrative, rightly or wrongly, I don't know, that maybe Brian and some of the Coinbase leadership were kind of anti-Bitcoin and more pro-Ethereum and more just simply pro the idea of letting users trade the long list of useless or not useless, depending on your take, altcoins, which is fine. You know, everyone should be able to trade what they do, whatever they want in an ideal world. Of course, now Coinbase are the custodian of a whole lot of Bitcoin for the various ETFs. Just interested in kind of how you think about that.
So I think the way to view this is crypto Twitter can get very loud and vocal about things that, you know, don't necessarily move their bags.
Yes.
And I think for a long time, people equated Coinbase's, you know, lack of action related to Bitcoin or whatever as like, hey, they're anti-Bitcoin. But I don't think that's ever been true. I mean, Coinbase has had the largest stack of any Bitcoin, of any institution, I think, around the world for probably the last like 10 years, at least since like the Zappo acquisition for sure. And Brian himself, I believe, is also a fairly large Bitcoin holder. So I think when you put the pieces together, now you look at the ETF where it's Coinbase custody, you know, with all the major ones, at least as of today, I think you can see that Coinbase has historically been very Bitcoin aligned. Just was looking for, you know, other pieces that could help generate, you know, different revenue streams. And because Ethereum is more programmable, there was just more things happening on Ethereum. But I think that's more of a narrative from kind of crypto Twitter than what's actually happened in reality.
Very well said. Okay. William Gibson famously said that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. With that in mind, Rich, can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people aren't aware of it?
That's a great question. I think What I would probably say is just looking at Bitcoin DeFi. And I think that's a little bit of like an obvious answer. But if you kind of dive into the nuts and bolts of it, what I would love to see over the next, 5 to 10 years is people actually are going back to the original vision of Bitcoin, which is Bitcoin as money and be your own bank. And there's many places around the world where folks don't have access to solid rails or have unstable governments or dynamic or unstable currencies, right? Like they've got all these real challenges. And I think if we go back to the original ethos of Bitcoin, which was, this alternative traditional financial system, I think we're, if not already there, very close to that actually being possible. And then I think there's a whole adoption curve. There's other things that need to happen on top of it. But I do think that for, potentially, billions of people around the world, there is an alternative where you get to use Bitcoin as this digital gold. You borrow against it for dollars. And that becomes kind of the new underpinning of, kind of this new financial system. And of course, I want that reality to happen on Core. But I do think it's just this amazing opportunity for us to kind of fix some of the wrongs that we've seen in the centralized world. And that's going to change, that's going to take a lot of shift in people's viewpoint to make that a reality. But I think now we're finally at the point 15 years plus into the Bitcoin experiment where, we can go make it happen.
I love it. Let's hope so. All right, it brings us nicely actually to the final question, Rich, which is, what is your favorite science fiction book, film, or TV show?
I don't read a ton of science fiction. I think I'll give you two answers. One's the classic crypto answer, which is Snow Crash. Yes. But I think the other one that I really enjoyed was the Three Body Problem series. Yes. I never thought I would, but I just got absolutely lost in those books.
Yeah, fascinating. So I'm not sure if it would surprise you, and it probably won't, but Snow Crash is actually a popular answer to that question here on the Crypto Conversation. But even more so, the Three Body Problem is actually the single, most popular answer. And it's the books, because obviously the Netflix TV adaptation only came out recently. But did you watch that as well?
I did not. My fiance actually was telling me to watch that, but I have not had a chance to watch it myself.
Well, it's pretty good, but I say that from the perspective of someone who's watched it and actually has not read the books. But
I recommend the audiobooks. The audiobooks are actually super, super good.
Yeah, I think that would be the way to go. All right. Hey, this was a lot of fun, Rich. Thank you so much for coming and spending some time with us today. Just to close it out, tell people where you like to hang out on X, Twitter, or anywhere else on the internet. And of course, again, just make the case for why people should go and look at what you guys are building with Core, maybe stake some Bitcoin, all that good stuff. What should people do? Where should they go?
So I can be found on X. My name is Rich Rines, or my handle, I guess, is Rich Rines. Fairly active. I do a decent amount of media and then Twitter Spaces, that sort of stuff. Really trying to get the core message out there far and wide. I talk a lot about Bitcoin. When I decided now almost 10 years ago, this is what I wanted to spend the rest of my career on. I really mean it. I geek out on this stuff. I love reading the latest research. Like it is, just truly enthralling to me. You can check out Core on Core Dao _org on Twitter. Fairly large following, lots of announcements, lots of Twitter Spaces, that sort of thing there too. We also talk about product releases, all that sort of thing. And then I think as the kind of final call to action, check out Ignition program, check out Core staking and Bitcoin staking. There's no better time to get involved than today.
I like it. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Rich. All the best, and bye for now.
Thanks, Andy. Talk soon.
All right. There you go. That was Rich from, Core. The Core Dao, but Core blockchain, doing big things for Bitcoin. So many interesting projects suddenly building on Bitcoin. Amazing to see, fantastic to see. And Rich was cool. He was excellent. A lot of great things to say, very insightful. And of course, can't really go wrong with someone who's going to go for Snow Crash and the Three Body Problem, the book version, or the audiobook version, if you like. I think that's the way to go. Yes, indeed. All right. Well, thank you for listening, team. We reached the end of another show. Please make sure you are subscribed to the Crypto Conversation in whatever podcast app you are using. But that is it for today. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave New Coin. Bye for now.